My name is Elaine, and 3 weeks ago I walked out of my son's house with nothing but a coat, a tote bag, and the echo of my daughter-in-law's voice screaming that I had ruined their lives. Megan stood in the hallway, her eyes burning, while my granddaughter Emily flung a glass of water that missed me by inches. James, my only son, just stood there, silent, arms crossed, watching it all happen, like I was a stranger who'd wandered into their home. I didn't yell back. I didn't even ask what exactly I had done, because by then I understood. They didn't want an answer. They wanted me gone. So I packed slowly, one drawer at a time, folding the same clothes I'd washed for them for years, while they whispered behind my back, like I couldn't hear through the walls. It all started with a phone call. Just a simple, routine call from the county health office asking for updates on my insurance. They asked about who lived in the house, how the bills were handled, and whether my son contributed to the household. I answered like I always did, with the truth. James was on disability, but sometimes did odd jobs for cash to help out. I didn't think twice. I didn't know that sentence would set something on fire, that it would trigger a chain of events that would lead to me being treated like a criminal in my own family's home. That night, they didn't wait for an explanation. Megan came storming into my room, waving a letter from the benefits office like it was a death certificate. She was livid, yelling something about the payments being frozen and how I had jeopardized everything. Emily stood behind her, arms crossed, smirking like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. I looked at James and asked him to explain, to tell me what this was all about. But he didn't speak, not even a blink. I remember feeling my knees weaken, but I stood still, holding onto the edge of the dresser like it could keep me from falling. Megan told me I had no respect, that I had always meddled. I couldn't just keep my mouth shut, and now they would all suffer because of me. She said I had betrayed them, even though all I'd done was answer a government worker's questions with honesty. No one asked if I had meant harm. No one gave me the benefit of the doubt. They had already decided I was the villain, and all that was left was to push me out. Emily threw open the front door and said that if I didn't leave, she would call someone to remove me. She's 20, still lives at home, barely works, but somehow in that moment she held all the power. I looked around at the house I had helped clean, the dinners I had cooked, the laundry I had folded, and I didn't see one face willing to stand up for me. Not even my son. So I walked out. Not a single word. No suitcase, just the bag I used to carry groceries. The wind hit my face as I stepped off their porch, but the sting didn't come from the cold. It came from knowing that, after everything, I had been nothing more than a burden in their eyes. And the worst part? I still didn't understand exactly what I had done wrong. Only that I had been erased, like I never mattered at all. The house was always quiet in the mornings, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that made you feel peaceful. It was the kind that made you feel like you had to tiptoe around your own existence. I'd wake up at 6, the same time every day, and start moving before anyone else stirred. The dishwasher was never emptied. Towels from the dryer sat balled up for days unless I folded them. Dishes were left on counters with food still crusted on the edges. I took care of all of it without being asked, and certainly without being thanked. Megan didn't speak to me unless she needed something. Even then, she barely made eye contact. She floated through the house like she owned every corner of it. Which, to be fair, she probably thought she did. Emily was worse. She was 20, still living at home, but acted like a guest of honor at a gala. She rolled her eyes when I walked into the room and huffed loudly if I happened to be standing in front of the fridge she wanted to open. James didn't say much of anything. He was either asleep or glued to the television. If there was a conversation between us in the last year that lasted more than 2 sentences, I couldn't recall it. My room was a laundry room guest hybrid. No windows, just a loud vent that buzzed when the heat kicked on. Most of my things were stored in clear plastic bins because there wasn't enough space in the closet. Megan's winter coats filled that already. I told myself it was enough, that I had a roof and a bed, that being useful was its own reward. But the truth was, I felt invisible. Not in a poetic way, but in a real, practical way. Like if I disappeared tomorrow, they'd only notice because the towels were still damp and the sink was full. And then there was April, Megan's older sister. She didn't live there, but you wouldn't know it by how often she showed up. She never knocked, just walked right in like she had a key to my son's life. She called me Mum in that fake sweet way that made my skin crawl. She'd pour coffee I bought, sit at the table I wiped, and make comments like, "I don't know how you do it, Elaine. All this mess, day after day." Then she'd smirk like she knew something I didn't. I tried to stay out of the way. I kept my footsteps soft, avoided the living room when Emily was there, and did my chores like I was clocking into a shift no one admitted I worked. But April had a way of turning the air hostile just by sitting still. She'd flip through mail that wasn't hers, whisper things to Megan when she thought I couldn't hear, and give me these long, slow stares, like she was studying a problem she meant to solve. I began to feel like an intruder in my own life. Once, I heard her tell Megan, "Maybe it's time you and James had some space. You know, just your real family." Megan didn't disagree. She didn't say a word, just kept scrolling her phone, like the suggestion was already written into some silent plan. It wasn't one moment that broke me. It was all of them. The paper cuts of daily disregard. The way April said things like, "You're still here," with a laugh in her throat. The way Emily would slam the door on her way out, like the world owed her silence and I was interrupting. James never stopped them, not once. I told myself he was tired, worn down, trying to keep peace. But deep down, I think he had made his peace already. Just not with me. There was no warmth, no good mornings, no shared meals. Just a rhythm of small tasks I performed while they lived their lives around me, like I wasn't there. And I stayed. I stayed because I didn't have anywhere else to go. Because I thought maybe if I just kept being useful, they'd see me again. But I was wrong. They didn't want me to see. They wanted me out of the way. And every silence, every turned back, every smirk from April told me that was exactly where they meant to keep me, until they no longer needed even that. It was a Tuesday morning when the phone rang, nothing special about it. I had just finished folding a stack of towels and was about to start wiping down the counters when I picked up. The number on the screen looked familiar, County Health Services. So I answered like I always did. The woman on the other end sounded young, polite, probably reading off a list of questions she had asked 100 times before. She asked if my address was still the same, if I lived alone, and how many people were in the household. I told her it was me, my son James, his wife Megan, and their 2 kids. She moved on to questions about income and contributions to the household. I said James was on disability, which was true. Then I added, just conversationally, that he sometimes did small handyman jobs for neighbours or people from church. Nothing major, just enough to help cover groceries or the water bill. At the time, it felt like harmless small talk. I didn't say it with any agenda. I wasn't trying to report anything. I wasn't even sure she wrote it down. She just said, "Uh-huh," moved on to the next question, and thanked me for my time at the end. I hung up, poured myself a cup of coffee, and went back to the laundry like nothing happened. There wasn't a single part of me that thought I had done something wrong. I'd answered honestly, casually, the way you do when someone asks how your family's doing. Later that day, I mentioned the call to April, without much thought. She was at the kitchen table, sipping coffee she didn't pay for, flipping through my mail like it was hers. When I told her I had spoken to someone from the insurance office, her eyes lit up a little. She asked what they wanted. I said just the usual, how many people live here, whether James contributes financially. Then she paused, smiled in that tight way she always did, and said, "Hope you didn't say anything that could get them in trouble." That was the first time I felt something shift, just a flicker of discomfort. I didn't know why she would say that, but her tone made me uneasy. I laughed it off, said it was nothing, and walked away. But all afternoon her words kept echoing in my mind. Not because I thought I'd said too much, just because she seemed to think I had. It planted something in me I didn't have a name for yet, a sense that maybe that call wasn't as harmless as I believed. I shook it off and kept cleaning, telling myself people overreact sometimes. Still, a small part of me began to wonder. It started with a letter. A thick white envelope addressed to James arrived in the mail one morning, and I watched him open it at the kitchen table without saying a word. His eyes scanned the page, then he folded it back up and shoved it under a pile of magazines like it had never existed. Megan came home later and found it. I was in the hallway folding clean sheets when I heard her voice rise, sharp and fast, demanding to know why no one had told her. By the time I walked into the kitchen, she was waving the envelope in the air and staring straight at me. Her eyes were wild. She asked me what I had said on the phone, what details I gave, and who I talked to. I blinked and tried to understand what she meant, still holding a pillowcase in one hand. When I told her it was just a routine call from the health office, she cut me off. She shouted that they were freezing James's disability review, that the benefits were on hold, that now everything, from rent coverage to food stamps, was being questioned. I opened my mouth to explain, to say it was nothing but small talk, but she didn't let me. Emily came in then, holding her phone and smirking like she'd been waiting for the show to start. She muttered that I always had to make things harder, that I couldn't just stay in my lane. Then she laughed under her breath and leaned against the counter like she was watching a sitcom. I looked at James. I waited for him to say something, anything. He didn't. His eyes stayed on the envelope. He didn't even look at me. Megan stepped closer and said I had betrayed them, that I'd always been a problem, that they had let me stay out of pity, and I'd paid them back by ruining their lives. I felt my breath catch. Not from fear, but from the finality in her voice. Like this had been building, and now they finally had their excuse. Emily tossed a kitchen towel on the floor near my feet and said I should pack my things. James still said nothing, not even when I asked him quietly if this was really happening. He kept staring at the table, as if he didn't acknowledge me, it would all go away. I went back to my room and closed the door gently behind me. My hands were shaking, but I folded my clothes with care. I packed the few things I had and tucked my pillbox in the corner of the bag. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just moved like someone who already knew there was no coming back. When I stepped into the hallway with my bag, no one looked up. Megan was texting. Emily was scrolling. James had gone somewhere, or maybe he'd just disappeared into the background like he always did. No one said goodbye. No one opened the door for me. So I opened it myself, stepped into the cold air, and left the only place I had called home in years. And they let me go. Like it meant nothing. Because to them, I never really mattered. The first night I left, I stayed at a 24-hour diner until the sun came up. I sat in the corner booth, nursing a cup of black coffee that went cold fast, watching the parking lot lights flicker. I didn't have a plan, just a bag on the seat next to me and a heart that couldn't stop racing. By morning, I found a notice on a bulletin board in the laundromat 2 blocks away. It was a handwritten flyer that said, "Room for rent, small, cash only, no questions." I tore the number off and called from a payphone, barely able to hear over the cars on the road. The room was behind the laundromat itself, up a side alley, tucked between a storage shed and a rusted chain-link fence. The man who showed it to me didn't ask for an ID. He just looked me over once, asked if I had the first month's rent in cash, and handed me the key. It stuck when I turned it, and the door creaked open like it hadn't been used in weeks. The place was barely more than a closet. one twin bed with a thin mattress, a dresser with two drawers that didn't quite line up, and a table pushed against the wall that held a lamp missing its shade. The window faced a brick wall. There was no TV, no stove, just a microwave and a sink with rust around the drain. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was quiet. I spent the first night curled on the bed, coat still on, afraid to unpack, not because of the room, but because unpacking felt like admitting this was real, that I had no one to call. No one would notice I was gone. I taped a note above the sink that read, "Breathe. You're not there anymore." I said the words out loud twice, hoping they would stick. For the first time in years, I slept without hearing someone slam a door or stomp through the hallway. But the silence didn't feel like peace at first. It felt like an absence, like the echo of everything I had lost. I thought about Lucas that night, my grandson. He was 17 and quiet, always with headphones in, always watching more than speaking. He never joined the others in mocking me. He never said much at all. But sometimes, when I'd leave a plate of food for him or fold his laundry, he'd look at me, not with pity or annoyance, but with something close to kindness. Once I caught him gently moving a towel I had folded so it wouldn't slide off the dryer. Just that small gesture, but it stayed with me. He was the only one who didn't treat me like I was invisible. I wondered if he even knew I was gone, if anyone had told him, or if he'd just come downstairs one day and noticed the hallway was a little quieter. I thought about calling him just to hear his voice, just to feel like I still existed somewhere in someone's memory. But I didn't. I couldn't drag him into my mess. So I lay there in the dark, hands folded over my stomach, listening to the muffled hum of the laundromat's dryers through the wall. It wasn't much. It wasn't home. But it was a start, and for now, that had to be enough. It had been 3 weeks of silence. Not a single call, not a single text. The phone sat on my nightstand, screen blank, gathering a fine layer of dust. I told myself I was grateful for the quiet, but deep down, I kept checking it every morning, like maybe someone would remember I existed. That night, it rang. I was halfway through a bowl of soup, sitting on the edge of my bed with the TV on mute, when it buzzed once. Then again. And again. First it was James, then Megan, then a number I didn't recognize. 5 calls in under 10 minutes. I just stared at the screen, heart starting to pound. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My fingers hovered over the screen but never moved. I waited, breath held, until the last call went to voicemail. I set the phone down and walked to the sink, trying to steady myself, but it rang again and again. Over a dozen missed calls before I finally opened the first voicemail. It was Megan. Her voice was shaking, but not the kind of shaking that comes from regret. She was frantic, panicked, saying it was about Lucas, that he hadn't come home, that he was gone. I sat down hard on the edge of the mattress, the phone pressed against my ear like it might break in my hand. She didn't say sorry, didn't ask how I was, just that Lucas had left, that he wasn't answering his phone, and they didn't know where he had gone. The second voicemail was from James. He sounded tired, defeated. Said Lucas had been acting strange for days. Maybe he came to find me. If I had heard from him, I needed to call back immediately. I let the phone drop to my lap and stared at the wall in front of me. My throat felt tight, my stomach hollow. I wanted to scream, to throw something. But all I could do was sit there and replay their words. They weren't calling to make things right. They weren't calling because they missed me or regretted what they'd done. They were calling because the one person they had left who still had a heart had vanished. And now they were afraid. Lucas was gone. My quiet, kind boy who never raised his voice but always noticed when no one else did. He was gone, and the only time they thought of me was when they needed something, when their lies finally caught up to them. The phone buzzed again, Another call. Another voicemail. I didn't answer. I couldn't bring myself to, not yet. I curled under the thin blanket and stared at the ceiling, like it might offer me some kind of answer. And for the first time since I left their house, I felt something stronger than sadness. I felt fear. Not for me, but for him. Because I knew Lucas, and if he was gone, if he had walked away from that house without a word, it wasn't random. It was because someone had pushed him out. And I had a terrible feeling I already knew who. The call came just after noon the next day. It was a number I didn't recognize, and for a second I almost let it ring out of habit. But something in me said, "Answer." And when I picked up, the voice that greeted me made my breath catch in my throat. It was Lucas. His voice was soft, almost uncertain, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in hours. He said he was safe, staying with a friend named Malik. He asked if he could come to me, not as a question full of drama, but as something small and honest, like he already knew the answer but needed to hear me say it. I told him, yes, of course, right now if he wanted. There was no hesitation. Just this wave of something, warm, breaking through the tightness in my chest. He was quiet for a second. Then he said they kicked him out. Not in so many words, but in the way people do when they want to hurt you without admitting it. Emily had called him weak for defending me. Megan told him to stop being dramatic. James barely looked up. When he tried to explain why he cared, they laughed. Then Megan told him if he loved me so much, maybe he should go live with me. So he did. He packed a bag, slipped out, and went to the one person who had never turned him away. I listened to every word, trying not to let my voice shake. I told him he didn't do anything wrong, that none of it was his fault, that I'd been waiting for this call every night without even realizing it. He asked again if I meant it, if I really wanted him there. And I told him I did, not because I pitied him, not because I needed someone, but having him near made the silence feel less like a punishment and more like a choice. He sent me the address. I wrote it down with hands that wouldn't stay still, and as I grabbed my coat and left my apartment to go get him, I felt something settle deep inside me. Like for the first time in a long time, something good was about to begin. Something real. Something ours. Lucas moved in with nothing but a duffel bag and a hoodie that smelled like laundry soap and rain. He didn't talk much the first night, just nodded when I offered him tea and sat on the edge of the bed like he wasn't sure how long he'd be allowed to stay. I didn't press him. I just handed him a clean towel and said, "You're home now." We shared everything in that tiny room. The table became a desk. The floor became our dining space. Some nights we ate toast and eggs, with the TV on low, not really watching, just letting the sound fill in the silence we were still learning how to trust. He started to sleep better. I could tell by the way his shoulders relaxed and how he stopped flinching when someone knocked on the wall next door. He even joked once that the broken dresser tilted just enough to look like it was bowing. I laughed, harder than I had in months. We got into a rhythm. I'd make breakfast. He'd do schoolwork on the couch with his earbuds half in, always leaving one ear open. I'd knit or read beside him, grateful for the quiet that no longer felt empty. One afternoon, he showed me a sketch he'd done for art class. It was our little apartment, the chipped table, the crooked lamp, even the grocery list I'd taped to the fridge. 2 chairs, side by side, and light coming through a window that barely opened. He said it felt safer than any place he'd ever lived. I didn't say anything. Just pressed the drawing flat and slid it under my pillow like a promise. The legal part came slowly. I went to the Family Services Centre and waited for hours with paperwork folded in a grocery bag. I told the woman behind the desk everything. How they'd thrown him out. I had voicemails, texts, and even a message from his school counsellor. She nodded through all of it and said we had a strong case. We went to court a week later. It wasn't dramatic, just a judge, a lawyer, and a few quiet statements. Megan didn't show. James didn't either. The judge read the file, looked at me, then looked at Lucas, who sat beside me in a clean shirt and scuffed sneakers. He didn't flinch when the order was read out loud, just squeezed my hand under the table. Temporary custody granted, no objections. We left the building under a grey sky that felt oddly soft. Lucas didn't say much on the walk home, but he didn't let go of my hand either. That night, we made grilled cheese and watched old cartoons with the sound turned off. We didn't need noise. We had peace. And for the first time in a long time, I looked around and thought, maybe this isn't just a place to land. Maybe this is the start of something we both get to build. Together. Safe. Seen. Home. It's quiet now, but it's a different kind of quiet. Lucas sits at the little table doing homework, his pencil tapping in a rhythm that tells me he's focused. I'm by the sink, steeping tea, watching the steam curl in the air, and there's nothing tense between us. No one is waiting to snap. No one is performing. There's art on the wall, his sketches, taped up, crooked but proud. The grocery list is written in his handwriting now, with silly doodles beside the eggs and bread. We laugh more than we used to. Not constantly, but enough to remember what comfort sounds like. They haven't called, not once. Not James, not Megan, not Emily. And that silence doesn't sting anymore. It feels like space. Like I finally have room to breathe. I used to lie awake, replaying every word they said to me, wondering what I could have done differently. But now I understand. I didn't ruin their lives. I just stopped letting them ruin mine. Lucas still asks me sometimes if I'd ever go back. Not to stay, just to talk. And I tell him the truth. I didn't leave because they kicked me out. I left because I finally believed them when they showed me who they were. They said I was disposable, and for a long time I acted like they were right. But I'm not. I'm still here, still standing, and for the first time in years I'm not just surviving, I'm living. Sometimes peace doesn't come with a door slam or a speech. Sometimes it slips in quietly, in a laugh over toast, or a lamp you fix together. And if I've learned anything, it's this. You don't ruin people's lives by protecting your own peace. You save it. You save yourself. And maybe, just maybe, someone else who needed saving got saved too.